And here we are with Dead Space Ignition, the third entry in the Dead Space series, and one which changes the game completely. Ignition launched on the PS3 and Xbox 360, coming direct to the digital stores on the 12th of October 2010. Now at this time, there were two divisions in gaming, the physical release games and the digital ones, the latter of which were regarded as lesser titles. It was kind of like the difference between a cinema release and a film going direct to DVD. This assumption wasn't always correct, and there are tons of examples of indie games which helped change the perception over time, but Ignition was not one of those. Developed by Megatube, Visceral Games and Sumo Digital, with publishing done by EA, Ignition launched to a less than stellar critical reception.
Wow.
Now that's pretty damning. However, me and the critics don't always see eye to eye, and so I went into Ignition full of hope, full of wide-eyed wonder, and I'm glad to say the game sucks ass.
I'm sorry.
During the course of this review, I'll detail what it does right, and the many things it does wrong. Now let's dive in. What makes a Dead Space game a Dead Space game? Is it limb dismemberment, third-person action-based horror? Or is it the world itself, where the environments and lore you uncover are as rich in character as the protagonists themselves? Whatever you think makes a Dead Space game a Dead Space game, I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't a puzzle game, and that's exactly what Ignition is. Changing genre isn't necessarily a bad thing when it's done well. With enough hallmarks of the series to tie it all in, it doesn't matter if it's a departure from what came before. Just look at Extraction. But the issue is Ignition doesn't do anything that well. Now I'm going to use my powers here to read your mind. When you started playing Dead Space 2, I know you were thinking, who's this guy opening my cell? What's his story? What's driven him to free Isaac? I bet he's going to be really important going forwards in the, oh wait, he's dead. Well, that guy is Franco Delisle, and he's the main protagonist of Ignition. The story sees Delisle and his secret lover Sarah Anderson working on the Sprawl, a space station located on Saturn's moon Titan. As an engineer, it's his job to make sure things are staying in tip-top shape, and as it would happen, today isn't going to be a typical 9 to 5, as the Sprawl has been visited by some unwelcome guests. The story is literally a pick-your-own-adventure comic. You start and end in the same place regardless of choice, but how you get there depends on you. Will you go and fix the lighting, or assist in a hostage rescue? Whichever choice you pick branches off into separate choices, making a maximum of 4 different playthroughs to see how the story can change. And at only 90 minutes for a first run, and getting considerably shorter with each subsequent playthrough, there isn't a huge time investment to see how differently these scenarios can play out. Now without spoiling it, some of these paths weave a satisfying story, where in others, there's decisions that play out that seem to come out of nowhere, with no emotional weight and no rational explanation. It's like a switch is pressed and Delisle goes from normal person to straight up psychopath. Now is it the marker making him do this? His devotion to unitology? Or something else? I don't know. And the story doesn't bother to hang around and answer that. Now with the entire plot being delivered through a motion comic, you'd expect the art and voice acting to be top notch. But just like Delisle's motivation, it can't remain consistent. The pendulum swings from great to Dragon Ball Super level, from performances that complement the art, to whatever the hell this is.
We're a little busy right now, Weaver.
I don't care if you're on fire, get over.
Did you cut him off?
Yeah, fuck him.
Run that back.
We're a little busy right now, Weaver.
I don't care if you're on fire, get over.
I can only assume the voice talent didn't see the stills, because if they did, there's no way they'd deliver the lines in the cadence and tone that they are. The entire story, from the choices to the performances, feels disjointed, sloppy, and half-hearted. But with any game, it all boils down to gameplay, and as I said at the outset, Ignition is a puzzle game. The comic will bring you to a scenario where you will need to do a multitude of tasks to open doors, fix lights, or hack into machines, and these tasks are broken down into 3 different categories. Hardware cracks, which are logic-based puzzles. In these, you need to line up lasers into their separate endpoints, and by combining red and green, you can make yellow. Solve the puzzle before the time's up, and you're golden. Secondly, you have trace puzzles, where you need to hack into a system. The goal is to reach the end before the AI, while avoiding objects and other AI traces that'll slow you down. It's the closest you can get to a sperm simulator. So if nothing else, you could probably use this to teach reproduction in a high school class. Finally, you have system overrides. It's essentially a tower defense game. You have a multitude of units at your disposal, and it's your job to get past all the defenses and damage the end goal. Now, as the game progresses, each branching path you take along the 4 chapters will upgrade your rig, leading to a larger pool of options at your disposal. For tracers, you'll now have access to the same countermeasures as the AI, which you can use against them to aid your progress to the goal. For the hardware cracks, you'll gain additional nodes to make larger and more complex paths for the lasers, as well as the option to remove obstacles entirely. And finally, when it comes to the system overrides, you get to use advanced viruses, which can turn the opposing AI against itself, or cloak a unit, which can get past basic defenses without an issue. These upgrades are used to keep the experience fresh along the 4 chapters. The puzzles ramp in difficulty, and on the first playthrough, it's clear they are designed to show you how to use these new upgrades effectively. And to the game's credit, it was rare that I beat any of them on the first attempt. The logic puzzles, in particular, proved quite challenging, and there was a satisfying feeling in finally figuring out the solution to these. So if nothing else, Ignition proved one thing to me: I wouldn't make a great Vulcan. Now, with 4 playthroughs needed to see every branching path, that equates to a total of 33 different puzzles, which to see all of it will take about 5 or so hours. Now, after finishing the first run, I was invested enough to see through all the different story paths and their puzzles through to completion. But, as with most things in this game, there's an issue with this too. Unfortunately, the devs made the decision to keep your rig fully upgraded after your first run. And all this meant was the subsequent playthroughs were incredibly simple, as the tools you have from the endgame make a mockery of the first 3 chapters. For those of you that feel particularly competitive, Ignition offers a leaderboard where you can aim for the fastest overall completion time. Now, I can't say I'm one of those people, but it's nice to have the option thrown in for good measure. And to be honest, the main reason you're playing this is because upon completion of the game, it unlocks some goodies for use in Dead Space 2. Now, you get access to a hacker suit, which makes hacks easier in the main game, a new skin for the contact beam, and access to conduit rooms which contain a host of goodies as well as audio logs from Delisle himself. Now, as I'd never played Ignition before, it could be that my issues with the story told here are solved in Dead Space 2, but personally, I hate the idea that this content was locked behind completion of another separate experience, and especially one that is chargeable at $3.99. Ignition was bundled in as a freebie to people who pre-ordered Dead Space 2, but why should those people get a gameplay advantage over others? Locking content out to inflate pre-order numbers is scummy as hell, and is something that games do all the time, even today. It's a practice I don't usually take part in. 99% of the time, I'll choose to not redeem the codes that give additional advantages, as I don't want the experience hampered by an artificial reduction in difficulty or resource management. Granted, this is a very personal gripe, and one that I'll have to put to the side when I boot Dead Space 2, as I want to see just how much of an impact these conduit rooms make to the experience. Will they fill in some of the blanks in Ignition's story and make me look over this experience with a greater appreciation? Or will it confirm my fear that this kind of cross-progression to inflate pre-orders is potentially harmful to the experience? We'll have to wait and see on that. Now, to bring this review to a close, Ignition is a throwaway game which leaves everything that makes Dead Space what it is at the door. It gives us the backstory to a character I couldn't care less about, while delivering its story through inconsistent art and voice acting. The puzzles can be enjoyable, but after 90 minutes, the game has lost all its luster. Now, I love a short, sweet experience as much as the next guy, but Ignition isn't that. By the time I'd done all 4 story paths, I had nothing but a sour taste in my mouth. Do yourself a favour and avoid playing through Ignition. It's not worth the $3.99, and more importantly, it's not worth your time. And that's it for this review. If you enjoyed it, put a like on it and subscribe for more Dead Space content. I try to respond to everyone on my channel, so let me know what your thoughts on the game are, and we can discuss it. Up next, I'll be moving over to Resident Evil for the Shadow of Rose DLC, as well as RE-Verse, before looping back to the rest of the Dead Space series. Now, I look forward to seeing you back here soon. If you're still craving that little bit more from me, consider checking out my podcast, In PS We Trust. It's a PlayStation podcast where me and my co-hosts discuss the latest news, rumours and hype for all things survival horror and PlayStation. I'll have links in the description. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.